Hello, United Recovery family. It's Matt. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and a follower of Jesus Christ, and I'm humbled to have the opportunity to bring the recovery message on this second Monday of July. Last week, Will kicked off our series on freedom, and he talked about how certain kinds of freedom are not good for us. And he shared the quote from the Ninth Step Promises, "We're going to know a new freedom." And we talked about what that new freedom looks like. Will shared a verse from Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, which made it really clear whom it is that sets us free. That would be Jesus. But then goes on to say, don't be burdened by the yoke of freedom. Don't be burdened again by the yoke of freedom. The yoke of freedom. Isn't that an oxymoron? But Will explained the difference as being the freedom to do whatever we want, like eating unhealthily, versus what we most want, which would be, good health, a healthy body, or a good quality of life. And it's always that yoke of freedom, which is the voice of slavery, that tells us we can't live without it, whatever it is that bonds us. And finally, Will went on to explain that entering into covenants is the way that we protect ourselves from our momentary desires to help us choose what we most want over, temptation. It was a really great message, and we could have spent the whole month fleshing out the content of that message. But you know me, I'm a thinker and an analyst. So Will's message just made me want to dig deeper. And when I did, I stumbled over this quote from the 12 and 12, page 122. We found that freedom from fear was more important than freedom from want. Freedom from fear more important than freedom from want. Now, as we just reviewed, Will explained last week how important it is to enter into covenants to temper our freedom to do whatever we want, those momentary desires or temptations. But this sentence is saying that freedom from fear is even more important than that. So this week, I'd like to spend the time that we have left to sort out two things. Why is freedom from fear more important than freedom from want? And second, how do we find freedom from fear? Now, I think the answer to the first question, why is freedom from fear more important than freedom from want, can be explained by a single sentence in the 12 and 12. This comes from page 76. The chief activator of our character defects has been self-centered fear, primarily fear that we would lose something we already possessed or fail to get something we demanded. The first thing we need to understand about why freedom from fear is more important than freedom from want is that it's like the chicken or the egg thing. But in this case, it's not a chicken or the egg conundrum. It's a fact. Fear precedes want. The authors have figured it out, and they're sharing the wisdom of the program with us. The chief activator of our character defects is fear. The second part of the sentence is what establishes the precedence of fear over want. Primarily fear that we would lose something we already possessed or fail to get something we wanted. So having the precedent of fear over want established, let's focus on the chief activator piece. And I think that will really explain why freedom from fear is more important than freedom from want. When we're actively practicing recovery, the whole point, the end game, right, is to try and minimize the activation of our character defects. Nobody's perfect, and the program gives us tools to utilize when we do pick up a defect and wrong another. But wouldn't you agree the point of practicing these principles in all our affairs is to try and minimize the activation of our defects? And here they've told us, fear is the chief activator not an activator, not the occasional activator, the chief activator. What that means to me is that whenever I pick up one of my character defects, it's most likely that I was acting out of some type of self-centered fear. So guys, here's a great tool for our recovery tool belt. Whenever we're facing a crisis, whenever we've gotten sideways with another, whenever we're disturbed, perturbed, or otherwise out of joint, as a check step, ask yourself, am I acting out of fear? And if the answer is yes, then ask yourself, what is it that I'm fearful of? Am I afraid I may lose something that I think I have? Prestige, power, image, control, possession, or any one of 1,000 other things? Or am I afraid that I may fail to get something I want? Prestige, power, image, control, possession, or 1,000 other things? I just activated one of my character defects with one of my coworkers prior to working on this message. And boy, do I wish I had worked my program and asked these questions before getting into it with them. Because now I have an amends to make. Because I know that I acted out of fear. I activated a whole handful of my character defects, and I wronged another. Having freedom from fear means we have freedom from activating our character defects, but we've got to work our program to earn that freedom every day. Which is the answer to the second question. How do we find freedom from fear? That same chapter of the 12 and 12, on step 12, tells us on page 124, we no longer strive to dominate or rule those about us in order to gain self-importance. We no longer seek fame and honor in order to be praised. When by devoted service to family, friends, business, or community, we attract widespread affection or are sometimes singled out for posts of greater responsibility and trust, we try to be humble, grateful, and exert ourselves more in a spirit of love and service. Tonight's scripture is from Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I think that's a great summary of how to live in recovery and how to find freedom from fear. So as we head into groups tonight, the question that I have for you is just this. Where have you acted out of self-centered fear? Fear that you would lose something or fail to get something you want. Have you sought to dominate anything or anyone around you to gain self-importance? I don't know about you, but that one hit me right between the eyes. Whatever comes out in group, I pray that it will lead you to freedom from fear, and that being free from fear will help you to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Good night, everybody. Have a great group.